There's excitement about Thomas Castellanos going into the season, but there were some concerns as well. And if what we heard about today at the ACC Kickoff is true, we should be in for a big season from QB number one.
You are Locked On Boston College, your daily podcast on the Boston College Eagles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is Locked On Boston College, your team every day. I am your host, AJ Black. To all you everydayers out there, how's it going? And if you're checking this out, we are a free podcast available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. Make sure to hit that like and subscribe button. Now, on today's show, we are going to look at the ACC Kickoff. We're going to talk about Thomas Castellanos' comments and everything else going on with him. Bill O'Brien had some big moments, and I'm going to give you some predictions about the preseason poll and where Boston College will fall on that. But today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. So, Wednesday, Boston College's turn at the podium. We had been waiting to hear what was going to happen, if there's going to be anything worth talking about. Because sometimes, I got to be honest with you folks, when you listen to some of these press conferences, it's a lot of boilerplate comments. There's a lot of the same things. We're trying really hard. We're working really hard. We have a great group. It's the same things every year. But you get those nuggets, and the nuggets that you get that are just exciting. And for me, watching this press conference and all the action that happened on Wednesday, which was a lot of feature on Boston College, one player specifically had a lot to talk about and was talked about quite a bit that really stole the show. And that was quarterback Thomas Castellanos. Now, Thomas Castellanos last year opened a lot of eyes. He ran for over 1,100 yards. He had 13 touchdowns rushing, 2,100 yards in the air, and I think he had 15 touchdown passes. But there were concerns. He threw 14 interceptions, and he kind of, tailed away a little bit in his passing as the season went on. There was so much to talk about with what he brought up in this game, in these press conferences. So let's dive into some of the big juicy nuggets that were brought up by Thomas Castellanos. The first thing I want to bring up is his relationship with new head coach Bill O'Brien. Now, Bill O'Brien is a quarterback's coach. He's worked with Bryce Young and Deshaun Watson and Tom Brady. We've gone over that. Even Matt McGloin. He made Matt McGloin into a Big Ten Player of the Year. Now that Jeff Hafley is gone, and you have a coach that is much more offensive oriented, is that going to significantly impact positively, hopefully, the play of Thomas Castellanos? Because we all saw the tantalizing potential of this quarterback who came in last year from UCF, but there were still areas that kept him down and that caused BC to lose game. I mean, his inability to throw at times was tough to watch. So Castellanos and O'Brien both talked about each other, and what I thought they said were very telling. Now, Castellanos, he said to a reporter that Bill O'Brien is the best thing that has happened to me in my career. I don't know how else you could take that as a positive. He's been around some great quarterbacks. I am so grateful, he said. And then O'Brien, the head coach that he is, gets into some details I thought were really key. We've heard about potential improvement in Castellanos, but what O'Brien said gives you ideas of how detailed oriented it's going to be and some of the bigger picture things that he's teaching Thomas Castellanos that you would teach an NFL quarterback, and that good coaches do, and they just didn't have it last year. He said, when it comes to Tommy, he is one of the most improved players on our team. He's done a really good job of learning our system, what we've been trying to do offensively, directing things, changing plays, changing protection, mic point type things. He's done a great job with all of that. He's done a good job of standing in there and delivering the ball and making those off-schedule plays that I think are a big part of his game. So what does that all mean? It's that now Castellanos has moved past the basics into what makes I want to say a field general out there, someone who understands the nuance of the quarterback position and can put his team in position to win. The being able to change protections and pointing out the mic, Those are big things. Those are big things that good offensive coaches teach quarterbacks because it helps everyone around them. The mic pointing is going to help with how you slide your protections, where to look for gaps and zones and things like that. He's done a lot of that. So, first of all, how big of a deal is it that he says he's one of the most improved players on the team? Now, if he improved from last year in a lot of these things, and I'm assuming that, accuracy and decision making are going to be part of this too, then man, Boston College is going to be in some good shape this year. I know some of this can be coach speak. I know that. But the fact that he's pointing out specific things, it's not just a general, yeah, he's improved. He's saying he's, improving on changing plays at the line, changing protections, trying to understand doing a great job of improving offensively with our new scheme. Those are all specific things that's going to make Thomas Castellanos that much more of a factor in a dangerous entity in the ACC this upcoming season. So that was a big thing. Now, Castellanos, if you were listening, there was the press conference, but there was also before and after types of things, and there were a few nuggets that came out about Castellanos that I thought were also very interesting. I believe it was an after the press conference interview. I saw someone tweeted out that Castellanos said that last year he had an AC joint injury in his non-throwing arm, suffered against Connecticut, and that impacted the way he played for the rest of the season, which, if you've been listening to this podcast, I have been saying for a while now, right? Like, there was something physically wrong with him. And it was that game against Connecticut. If you remember, that was the game he went out. And Emmett Morehead showed back up for what, like a couple sets of plays, and then Castellanos came back in, and he was just not the same. And he really wasn't the same the rest of the year. But Castellanos wanted to get that out, which was really interesting because it's such a different thing than what Jeff Hafley had done. I mean, God, for 4 years with Jeff Hafley, it was like Fort Knox with any injury news. You wouldn't tell he would never lie to your face, but he would never really tell you the truth. And so now he leaves, and Castellanos is like, yeah, I hurt my AC last year. So that was an interesting little point. And then in terms of Bill O'Brien too, Castellanos, when he was talking to the ACC panel with like Eddie Royal and that crew, he talked about how one thing that Bill O'Brien has helped him with was he connected him with Bryce Young. Now, Bryce Young almost won the Heisman under Bill O'Brien at Alabama. Don't tell that to a Crimson Tide fan because they thought O'Brien was the worst, but he did help Bryce Young get there. And so O'Brien got him connected with him. And so what Castellanos said was that he had a long conversation with Young about, what did you do during the offseason to get yourself ready to have those types of seasons? And he honestly, and I love this question at this point too, he also said, how did you work with Bill? How did you work with Coach O'Brien? And got feedback from a quarterback who'd worked with Bill O'Brien on how to best work with him. So I thought that was really cool because Bryce Young is a quarterback that has a lot in common with Thomas Castellanos. The size, the mobility, you can see that he could be that similar type of quarterback. And so that O'Brien connected, Castellanos to a quarterback that has experience and has done all this stuff and helped him, find out some nuggets, pick his brain. That's only going to be a good thing. Like, getting those little pointers could be huge. I mean, Donovan Azaraku later in the show talked about how O'Brien bringing in guys like Matthias Kiwanuka and other guys like that has helped too, because those guys come in and say, hey, did you see this? This is something I would have done. This is some things that you could try doing. And this is all helpful stuff. So that NFL connection that Bill O'Brien has is already starting to pay dividends already. Now, in our second segment, I want to talk about what Bill O'Brien had to say, because this is his first ACC kickoff event. And I want to look at some of the comments he made and my thoughts about some of the big things that happened there in just a moment. Game Time is the place to go if you are trying to get yourself Major League Baseball tickets. Red Sox are playing well. they're almost going to sign Alex Cora, it sounds like. If you want to get to Fenway Park, you need to get to Game Time with killer last minute deals, all in prices, and view for your seats, which, as I say all the time, is crucial at Fenway Park. And their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying Major League Baseball tickets. So I've used it before. I went to the UVA game last year with my family. It was a rainy day. I wanted to make sure my kids didn't get wet. So I wanted seats that were underneath an overhang. I found them on Game Time. I got a view from my seat, so I knew I was underneath one of the sideline, the end zones, but far enough back. I got there, got saved dry. My kids were happy. We made it through the whole game. And I thank Game Time for that. So you need to check out Game Time as well. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Locked On Boston College, AJ Black here. I'm the editor and publisher of Eagle Insider, part of the 247 Network. Make sure you get over there to get some more Boston College news. And if you want another episode of Locked On BC, go back to yesterday's episode too. When you're done with this one, I talked about why BC could be the dark horse in the ACC. Make sure you listen to that. It's a nice 20-minute episode right after this one. Go check that out as well. Now, Bill O'Brien, this is his first ACC media day as a head coach. This is his return to the ACC. I keep forgetting until he brought it up that he was in the ACC for a while. He worked under Ralph Friedgen at Maryland, and he worked at Georgia Tech with, I think it was Paul Johnson, for early on. So he's been in the ACC before, but this is his first as a head coach. Now, he brought up. They asked him a lot. Like, they were talking, as I mentioned, they talked to him about Castellanos. They talked to him about his the NIL and the changes that he's seen since he's been in. And I thought it was a funny question because he kind of shut it down with, "I've been part of college football. I was just at Alabama," but he answered it. He talked about the transfer portal, for instance, right? Since O'Brien has taken over, he has not landed a single transfer portal player. Now, that being said, Halfley landed 12 before he got there, and I believe there was a scholarship numbers crunch in at BC, so they couldn't add any more after O'Brien. But to be fair, that's the answer, right? Like, he hasn't landed any. But he shot back with a really interesting thought. Like, yeah, I haven't been a head coach in this new transfer portal world, but I dealt with the transfer portal, he basically said. Remember, when he took over at Penn State, that was at the heights of all of the sanctions against the Nittany Lions after the Joe Paterno fiasco. There were a lot of transfers, and he had to manage all of that. And I believe he got guys in as well to help his team be successful. So he understands all of that, and he has been part of it. So he's going to utilize that. Now, he talked recruiting, which I thought was an interesting conversation. And I'm curious to see how this is going to change, because what he said versus what we've seen so far in the class of 2025, it doesn't line up as much. Now, he said the majority of BC players need to be from within a 400-mile range of Chestnut Hill. And he mentioned that that's a big reason is that lots of families want to see their kids play, and that'll help bring kids here. Now, we've seen BC, even under O'Brien, still struggling with some of the Massachusetts kids. There's a bunch that did not even end up here. But 400 miles, when he was talking about it, includes New York, northern New Jersey, New England, parts of Pennsylvania. Seems like a fair thought. But if you look at what BC has landed so far, I mean, you got a quarterback from Oklahoma, his teammate from Oklahoma, a bunch of kids from Texas. You've got kids from Florida, a whole bunch from Georgia, 8 from Georgia, I believe it, or 6 or 7 from Georgia. You got a kid from California, potentially. You've got kids from all over the country. So it's not lining up exactly with what he said. Now, he said that they want to make some changes in terms of how things are moving forward. So, yeah, I'm curious how this is going to change, because as we've talked about on the show, there are certain Massachusetts schools that are just not interested in Boston College, like high schools. They're, look at Belmont Hills, for instance. They're just sending anyone and everyone to Duke. I know that there's a recruiting barbecue, and I don't believe any of the Belmont Hills kids are going there. So you're going to get your local kids, but I don't, building the mass of your team from this area. I still am curious to see if that is a possibility, even with a coach with the reputation that Bill O'Brien has, and it's a positive one, especially given his work with the Patriots. Like local kids know him, so that's going to have to be a drastic change because when you look at this year's class, the majority aren't within that 400-mile range. I don't think they're mostly outside of that. And if that's going to change, it's going to have to start looking for next year. Now, I would say I can understand it because I know some of the names that they're going after for the class of 2026, and there's a lot of really good ones that are they're gonna be on campus this week. Go to Eagle Insider, give you all the names that are going to be here that could make a majority of that class, but we'll have to wait to see what that's going to look like. He also talked about NIL really briefly, though. He didn't really talk a ton about it. And answered, that BC is going to be part of that landscape. That's what he expects that to be the case. And I've heard reports recently that the NIL pool is growing rapidly at BC, which is great. That's going to make a healthier program here. One last final thought about his comments. I didn't listen to every other coach. Believe me, I can't listen to all of these guys. He didn't have an opening statement. Jeff Hafley, I swore every year had an opening statement. They just went right to the questions with him. I don't know if that was his choice or that's just how they changed the system this year. But it was an interesting comment. He talked again, you go outside of the press conference about how the toughness and the attention to details in critical situations is what's going to make BC a good team. I think every BC fan for the last 15 years has been waiting for a head coach that has said that not only says they can do that, but can actually follow through on that. From watching Steve Adazio, messing up end of the half drives constantly to falling apart in the second half, to Jeff Hafley seemingly not knowing how to handle certain situations, having a strong X's and O's coach that knows what to do and has that Bill Belichickian mindset to know if something happens, this is what we do. If this happens, this is what we do. That is going to be a huge asset for a team like Boston College. When you don't have the skills players that a Miami, Clemson, or Florida State have, you need to do the little things right all the time. That's what makes you a scrappy team that you hear about Boston College all the time. That will make you a scrappy team, but a scrappy team that can beat teams too. So I'm really curious to see how that all plays out. And I imagine that that's going to happen, but we have to wait to see what happens there. Now, in our final segment, let's look at some predictions. What are going with the media poll coming out, the All ACC team? What players are going to get their names called, and who I think is going to get snubbed? We'll get into all that in just a moment. This is Locked On Boston College, your team every day. I'm AJ Black, and I want to tell you guys, are you tired of listening to screaming on ESPN and all those other sports shows, maybe Boston radio? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel for you to bring the biggest news without all the screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you can't miss options and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I got to tell you guys, side note about this. I have not listened to Boston sports radio in 10, 15 years. I went to Sirius XM for a while. Now I'm on to Locked On. I got to tell you, getting John Corrales talking Celtics or Locked On Red Sox talking the Sox is incredibly, you learn so much more, and it's a much more enjoyable experience than what you get on those other shows. So check those shows out wherever you get your podcast. Now, wrapping things up here, the ACC Media Days usually they always wrap up with their polls and their All ACC teams. Now, I don't expect any BC player to be sniffing ACC Player of the Year. Maybe there'll be a Boston writer who will vote for Thomas Castellanos, but Cam Ward's going to win it. Cam Ward and DJU probably will be 1 and 2. You'll have a few others smattering in there. Now, I'm looking at the all preseason polls. Who will be amongst those names that'll be on there? The positions I think that BC has the best chance to get in is on the offensive line. I don't think I have Drew Kendall up there. Unfortunately, I don't think Drew Kendall will be a first team All ACC center. He'll probably be second or third team. But Ozzie Trapilo, he will be, I believe, first team. I unfortunately think he could be the only first team All ACC player for BC. Now, players you could see coming up on second or third team, because I believe they do second, third, and honorable mention. I think you're going to probably see Drew Kendall, as I mentioned. I bet you will see Logan Taylor mentioned as well. I think those will be your three offensive linemen. They'll be smattered. Cam Horsley, I bet you he'll be second team. I think he'll be a second team defensive tackle. He's such an underrated player, and that's someone I don't talk enough about. But Horsley is a very good defensive tackle that deserves a lot more credit than he gets. And I think he's in for a big season this year. In terms of the secondary, don't think they're going to get anyone there. Linebackers, you may see Cam Arnold at third team or honorable mention. That's only because they're just names that people know. Wide receiver Lewis Bond probably will be third team or honorable mention, even though I think he's going to have a bigger year than people are giving him credit for. And I think that'll probably be it. They're not going to get a ton of respect. Kai Robichaux may get on there, but I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see. This is a team that I don't feel like is going to get a lot of attention until they actually start playing games, which, fair enough, that's all that really matters, right? Now, in terms of their record, I'm guessing they're going to be probably 12th to 14th in the ACC in this. That's around where they're usually at and what I expect them to be. And honestly, again, until they start playing the game, until Bill O'Brien shows that maybe they're a team better than what they are on paper, that's probably what they're going to be. So that would wrap up the ACC Media Day. Now, we're waiting. I think it's another week and a half until we kick off summer practices. And I cannot wait to get there and start talking about it with all you. Now, if you have not done so already, find Locked On BC wherever you get your podcasts or YouTube. Hit that subscribe button right now so you know when we have a new episode up, because I want you guys here every single day. My everydayers out there, I love each and every one of you. There's more room in this bus, so I want to make sure that you, if you're a BC fan, you're coming back here and listening to me. I'm going to have Mitch on hopefully soon to talk, Mitch Wolf, about from 247 to talk about everything BC related. We've got a lot going on this fall, and I want you guys here every single day at Locked On Boston College, your team every day.